It began on a morning when Maxi was trying to do something very ordinary. She was trying to make sense of money. This, as everyone knows, is not ordinary at all. It only pretends to be. On the desk lay a notebook, a calculator, 3 scribbled lists, 2 invoices, a half-finished cup of tea, and 1 sentence written at the top of the page. What is true wealth? Maxi stared at it. The sentence stared back with a calm confidence of something that knew it was about to cause trouble. Psycho lay beside the door, looking magnificently unconcerned with economics. To Psycho, wealth was a cool floor, a full bowl, a trusted human nearby, and the right to sigh dramatically whenever the room became too busy. Gypsy sat at the window, watching the garden with sharp, intelligent eyes. She understood value perfectly. A bird was valuable if it moved. A sound was valuable if it needed investigation, and a breeze was valuable if it carried information. Lucy was under the desk as usual, where she had placed herself directly on Maxi's foot. Lucy believed that all important decisions should be made with a Rottweiler involved. Maxi picked up an old coin from the desk. She did not know where it had come from. It was a dull silver, with worn smooth edges, and colder than it should have been. On one side was a picture of a crown, and on the other side were these words: "I am worth what you believe I am." Maxi frowned, and Lucy sniffed the coin and sneezed. The coin trembled, and then it melted, not into metal, but into water. A single clear drop rolled across Maxi's palm, glowing faintly with golden light. The room grew very still. The drop slid from her hand onto the page, and the ink began to move. The words, "What is true wealth?" dissolved and rearranged themselves into a winding golden path made of old receipts, stamped papers, banknotes, contracts, and promises. The path lifted from the notebook and stretched across the floor, out of the study, past the dogs, through the wall, towards somewhere that should not have existed before breakfast. At the edge of the path stood a sign: "The Road of Bright Promises." Maxi closed her eyes. "Oh no," she said, "not today." The sign shimmered. Beneath the first line, new words appeared. "This is not a bill, it is an invitation." Lucy stood up immediately. Psycho sighed. Gypsy lifted her head, as if listening to the sound of something hidden behind the world. Maxi looked at her cold tea, and then at the gold path, and then at the dogs. "I suppose," she said, "we are following the paperwork." Lucy stepped onto the road first. The road stretched across a wide open land, beneath a sky the color of old coins and stormlight. It was not made of stone, it was made of paper. Receipts, bank statements, promissory notes, IOUs, contracts, certificates, policies, ledgers, fine print, smaller fine print, footnotes that seemed to have footnotes of their own. Every step made a dry little whisper. Owed, paid, due, late, approved, declined, insufficient. Maxi did not like the sound. On either side of the road, fields lay pale and thirsty. The soil was cracked, though clouds gathered overhead. Dead fountains stood beside the path, their basins filled not with water, but with crumpled paper notes. The dogs moved differently here. Lucy tried to pick up one of the paper notes in her mouth, then dropped it with deep disappointment. Psycho sniffed a pile of coins, found nothing edible or meaningful, and walked on. Gypsy just kept her nose close to the ground. She could smell water somewhere, hidden, blocked, waiting. A little way ahead, a man sat beside the road with a cart full of golden bricks. The bricks were painted, and the paint was flaking. He held one up proudly. "Gold!" he cried. Maxi looked at it. "That is wood." "It is gold-colored wood." "But that is different." "Only if people notice," said the man. Behind him, another trader had set up a stall selling paper crowns, paper jewels, and paper keys to imaginary vaults. A woman hurried past, clutching a bag of coins to her chest. "Don't stop," she warned Maxi. "If you stop, you fall behind." "Behind what?" The woman blinked, her grip tightened. "I don't know." "Everyone." Maxi watched her hurry away. The road bent towards a glittering city in the distance. Its towers shone emerald and gold. Its gates were enormous. Its banners snapped in the wind. Across the archway, written in bright letters, were the words, "The City of Bright Promises." Lucy wagged her tail, but Psycho did not. Gypsy's ears went forward. Somewhere beneath the city, water called. The city was dazzling, at first. Its streets were paved with shining coins. Its windows were made of green glass. Gold-painted towers rose into the sky, and banners fluttered from balconies, all bearing the same phrase, "More is safer." People rushed everywhere, carrying purses and ledgers, locked boxes and measuring sticks. They counted while they walked. They counted while they spoke. Some counted other people's things. Some counted things they did not have. And some counted so hard they forgot to breathe. Everywhere, paper money drifted through the air like dry leaves. Nobody looked hungry, but nobody looked nourished. Nobody looked poor, but nobody looked peaceful. In the middle of the city stood a fountain shaped like a great golden bowl. It should have been overflowing. Instead, it was dry. Children sat on its edge, folding banknotes into boats and placing them in the empty basin. "They don't float," one child said. "No," said Maxi softly, "they wouldn't." A baker stood nearby, behind a beautiful stall with no bread on it. His sign read, "Finest bread in the city." "Where is your bread?" Maxi asked. The baker sighed. "Too expensive to bake." "But you are a baker." "Yes," he said. "And people need bread." "Yes," he answered. "And you have an oven?" "Yes," he said. "And flour?" "A little." "Then why not bake?" He looked nervous. "Because the price of flour went up, and the price of bread went down, and the value of effort is under review by the Ministry of Worth." Maxi stared at him. "That is a sentence wearing a costume." The baker looked relieved. "I thought so too." A little girl approached the stall holding a bunch of wild flowers. "I can help sweep," she said, "and I picked these." The baker's face softened. Before he could answer, a man in a polished green coat appeared, carrying a clipboard. "Flowers are not recognized tender," he said. The girl lowered them. Lucy stepped between the girl and the clipboard man. It was not a dramatic movement. It was simply enough Rottweiler to make the man reconsider his tone. Maxi crouched beside the girl. "Who told you the flowers have no value?" "The city," said the girl. Maxi looked at the wild flowers in her hand, small, brave, golden-hearted. "The city is mistaken." A bell loomed from the center of the city, and everyone froze. A voice rolled across the streets from a great palace at the end of the square. "Bring all questions of value to the House of Worth." The people bowed their heads. The paper money in the air fluttered like frightened birds. Maxi looked towards the palace. Its doors were tall, its windows were dark, its roof glittered with gold that did not feel warm. Gypsy growled softly, not at the palace, but at something beneath it. Before Maxi reached the palace, she passed through the great market. It was the busiest place she had ever seen, and one of the emptiest. At one stall, a man sold certificates, proving that other certificates were important. At another, a woman exchanged paper promises for slightly larger paper promises. A merchant shouted, "Buy security!" Another shouted, "Buy status!" A third shouted, "Buy the appearance of freedom!" Nobody was selling calm, and nobody was selling sleep. Nobody was selling laughter. Nobody was selling the feeling of sitting at a table where everyone had enough. Near the edge of the market, an old woman sat on a low stool with a basket of herbs beside her. No one stopped. Her sign read, Tea for tired hearts. Maxi approached. How much? The old woman smiled. What can you offer? Maxi reached for the coin in her pocket and then stopped. The coin had become water, and the water had become a question. I can listen, Maxi said. The old woman's smile deepened. Then sit. So Maxi sat. The dog settled around her. Psycho lay at the woman's feet, and Gypsy watched the crowd. Lucy rested her chin beside the basket of herbs with her personal interest. The old woman poured tea from a clay pot. It smelled of mint, rosemary, honey bush, and rain. People come to the city looking for wealth, she said, but most of them are only taught to measure money. Isn't that the same thing? Maxi asked. The old woman chuckled. Oh, child, no. She pointed to the dry fountain. Money is a symbol. It can be useful. It can help trade. It can carry gratitude when used cleanly. But when people forget what it represents, it becomes a paper moon pretending to be the sky. Maxi held a warm cup in her hands. Then what is currency? The old woman touched the side of the teapot. Currency is current. It must flow. A breeze moved through the market. Water flows, kindness flows, skill flows, time flows, care flows, and food flows. Healing flows, songs flow, help flows, gratitude flows, and love flows. Her eyes grew serious. When currency stops flowing, it becomes hoarding. When value is cut off from life, it becomes illusion. When money is backed by nothing real, it begins to feed on fear. Maxi looked around the market. So many people buying, selling, clutching, comparing, fearing, and still the city felt thirsty. A sudden crash came from the baker's stall. The little girl with the flowers had knocked over a bucket while trying to help. The clipboard man returned, puffing himself up. This labor has not been authorized. The baker looked at the girl and then at the flower, then at the empty stall, and then at Maxi. Slowly he took the girl's flowers and placed them in a jar. Thank you, he said. The girl's face lit up. The old woman stood and handed the baker a bundle of herbs. For the bread, she said. A carpenter nearby lifted his hand. I can fix your oven door. A musician said, I can play while people wait. A tired mother said, I can stir dough if someone holds the baby. Psycho, who had been resting with grave importance, leaned against the mother's leg, and the baby stopped crying. Something shifted. Not much, a small thing, a living thing. The baker lit his oven, and beneath the market stones, Maxi heard water move. The palace doors opened before Maxi touched them. Inside was a hall of mirrors, ledgers, green light, and polished floors so shiny they reflected everyone as wealthier than they felt. At the end stood an enormous curtain, and behind it something moved. A great shadow rose across the wall, tall as a tower, crowned and cloaked and glittering. A voice thundered, Who seeks value? Maxi stepped forward. I do. Who seeks wealth? Everyone in the hall trembled. I seek truth, said Maxi. The shadow paused. That had clearly not been on the usual form. Value is what I say it is, boomed the voice. Worth is what I measure. Wealth is what I count. The mirrors flashed with images, stacks of paper, towers of coins, locked vaults, full purses, empty faces. The voice grew louder. Without me, nothing has value. Without my stamp, nothing is real. Without my measurement, you are nothing. Lucy barked. Once. It echoed through the hall like a crack in glass. Gypsy slipped away from Maxi's side and moved behind the curtain. Gypsy, Maxi whispered. Too late. A huge crash and a clatter. A surprised yelp from someone who had not expected a German Shepherd cross husky to discover the machinery of illusion. The great shadow wobbled. Psycho walked forward, with slow dignity and sat in front of the curtain. The shadow shrank. Lucy grabbed the edge of the fabric and pulled, and the curtain came down. Behind it stood a small old man on a stool. He wore a huge crown, a cloak several sizes too large, and spectacles balanced on the end of an ink-stained nose. Around him were levers, lamps, smoke machines, mirrors, speaking tubes, and piles of blank paper. He looked at Maxi and then at the dogs. Then at the crowd now gathering behind her. "I can explain," he said. The people gasped. "The great counter," someone shrieked. "He is just a man," said another. The old man climbed down from the stool, clutching a ledger to his chest. "I had to make them believe," he said. "If they stopped believing, everything would collapse." Maxi looked at the pile of printed paper. "What backs it?" The great counter blinked. "The paper, the numbers, the promises. What are they backed by?" He looked towards the vault doors behind him. Gold letters above them read, "Reserve of true value." The crowd held its breath. The old man lowered his eyes. Maxi walked to the vault. The doors opened in a long, hollow groan. Inside there was nothing. No gold, no grain, no water, no tools, no medicine, no seeds, no bread, no shelter, no songs, no hands helping other hands, only dust. The crowd went silent. The kind of silence that comes when a story everyone has agreed to believe suddenly shows its seams. The great counter whispered, "I was afraid." Maxi turned to him. "Afraid of what?" "If people knew the vault was empty, they would stop trusting." "They did not trust," said Maxi gently. "They obeyed." The words landed heavily. Then Gypsy barked from inside the vault. Not an alarm, but a discovery. She was standing near the back wall, pawing at a crack in the stone. Water was seeping through, clear, golden, alive. Maxi knelt beside it. "There is a river under here." The old woman from the market appeared in the doorway, holding a teapot. "There has always been a river," she said. "It was buried under fear." The great counter looked confused. "But the vault is empty." "No," said Maxi. The vault was blocking what was real. The people began to clear the vault. At first they moved carefully, as if afraid of being fined by something invisible. Then faster. Letters were carried out. Contracts that had strangled kindness were untied. Old debts written in cruelty were torn up. Boxes of worthless paper were removed. Stones were lifted, and roots appeared, then mud, and then water. Lucy placed one paw in it and looked deeply satisfied. The stream widened. It curled around Maxi's feet, warm and bright as sunlight. It flowed through the vault doors, down the palace steps, into the square, and towards the dry fountain. The whole city watched. The water reached the golden bowl. For one breath, nothing happened, and then the fountain began to sing, not loudly, not like a machine, but like a spring remembering itself. Water rose from the center of the bowl and spilled over the edges in shining streams. The paper boats lifted at last, soggy and useless, and somehow forgiven. Children started laughing. The sound moved through the city faster than any coin. The baker arrived carrying bread, real bread, warm, uneven, fragrant, and priceless in the way that only real things can be. The little girl placed wildflowers beside the fountain. The carpenter fixed the baker's stall, and the musician played. The tired mother sat down and drank tea. A healer helped an old man's aching hands, and a farmer brought seeds. Someone mended shoes, someone told a story, someone shared soup, someone held a stranger while they cried. Someone said thank you and really meant it. With each act, the river grew brighter. Money did not disappear. Coins still clinked, notes still passed from hand to hand, but something had changed. The paper was no longer pretending to be life. It was only a tool, a symbol, a convenient little boat on a much larger river. Maxi stood beside the fountain, watching the city soften. The great counter sat on the steps, his large crown beside him. He looked smaller without the smoke and mirrors, but a bit kinder. "What do I do now?" he asked. Maxi handed him a loaf of bread. "Begin with something real." He held it as though it were treasure. The old woman poured tea into a cup and gave it to him. He looked surprised. "I have no coin," she smiled. "You have hands. Tomorrow help me carry water." The great counter looked at his ink-stained fingers, then nodded. The gold river flowed around them. Maxi placed her hands into the fountain. A small clear coin formed in her palm. Not silver, not gold, but water, light, current. On one side was a tiny river. On the other side were the words, "Let it flow." The old woman touched Maxi's shoulder. "Take it with you." "But what does it buy?" The old woman laughed. "Oh, Maxi, wrong question." And Maxi smiled. "What does it remind me of?" The old woman's eyes shone. "That true wealth is what nourishes life. Happiness, gratitude, and love. Fair exchange. Kindness offered without performance. Service given without slavery. Receiving without shame. And giving without disappearing." The fountain splashed softly. "Money can move through that," she said, "but it can never replace it." The road of bright promises appeared again at the edge of the square, but it looked different now. The papers were no longer dry and whispering. Green shoots had grown between them. Some receipts had become leaves. Some contracts had become compost. Some old notes had folded themselves into little boats and floated down the stream, harmless at last. "It is time to go," said the old woman. "Already?" "Currency moves," she said, "and so must you." Maxi looked at the city. The tower still glittered, but more gently now. The fountain flowed. The people were not suddenly perfect. Some still counted, some still worried, and some still clutched their purses. But now bread was baking and water was flowing. Flowers were valued, and somewhere a former great counter was learning how to carry buckets. Lucy trotted back onto the road first, leaving wet paw prints behind her. Psycho followed, calm and complete. Gypsy paused at the end of the square and looked back towards the palace, as if making sure the river would keep flowing. Then she turned and came with them. Maxi placed a clear coin in her pocket. It pulsed once, like a heartbeat, like a drop of water, like gratitude moving from one hand to another. The gold road lifted, the city dissolved into light, and Maxi fell softly back into morning. Maxi woke at her desk. The calculator was still there, the lists were still there, the invoices, the tea, predictably, was cold, and the dogs were in the usual places. Well, almost. Psycho lay by the door with a peaceful expression of someone who had never mistaken paper for wealth. Gypsy sat at the window, ears forward, listening to the hidden rivers of the world. Lucy had one damp paw. Maxi looked at her, but Lucy looked away. On the desk beside the notebook sat the clear coin. It was small and round and full of moving light. Maxi picked it up. It was not cold anymore. At the top of the notebook, the question remained, "What is true wealth?" Maxi took a pen and wrote beneath it, "Money is a symbol. Currency is a current. True wealth is what flows between living beings in kindness, service, gratitude, and love." She sat with that for a while, and then she added, "What can I give today that brings life back into flow?" Outside, the garden moved in its own economy. The sun gave light without an invoice. The trees gave shade without applause. The birds gave song without contracts, and the bees traded work for sweetness. The soil received what had fallen and turned it quietly into life. Maxi stood at the window and smiled. She did not hate money. She simply no longer mistook it for wealth. Money could help, money could move, and money could serve, but it was never meant to become the master. It was never meant to replace the living current. The richest life was not the one that hoarded the most. It was the one through which love could still flow. The one where bread was shared, where gifts were honored, where service was not exploitation, where receiving was not shame, where gratitude moved like water, where kindness became currency, where enough was not a number, but a feeling in the heart. The clear coin warmed in Maxi's hand. On its surface, tiny ripples moved outward in circles. Let it flow, it seemed to say. Maxi looked down at Lucy, Psycho, and Gypsy. I suppose, she said, we begin with breakfast. Lucy agreed immediately. Psycho rose with solemn approval, and Gypsy followed, alert and graceful. In the quiet kitchen, as the kettle began to boil and morning light filled the room, Maxi understood something simple and golden. True wealth was not locked in a vault. It was alive wherever love, service, gratitude, and fair exchange were allowed to move. And the river was always waiting.